legislative session and I guess the ongoing special sessions, and I guess I would interpret that to be also like what's still on the docket, potentially for the special session.
So, Rachel's, y'all can hear me, Rachel's gonna help me out, I think, a little bit, but, I think the main bills that we need to worry about is, there's one that's called HB 229, which all Texas legislation goes into effect on September 1 of whatever the year is, unless the bill says it's gonna go into effect later. So these bills aren't gonna go into effect until September 1. There's some nuances in them, but the main ones that I see that are a problem is there's one that's called HB 229, which says, in essence, that for state agencies, there can only be a binary gender, and that they have to record that information. And so what you're gonna see then is male, female, and so that completely wipes out intersex folks, or folks who are born with intersex traits, right? And that's about somewhere between 1.7 to 1.9% of our population. So if you look at the people in this room who have red hair, the number of people born with red hair is about 1.9% of our population, which is the same number of folks that are born with intersex traits. And a lot of times people don't even know that they have those traits until they're in their 40s, right? 40s, 50s, or they may never know. So that's one of the bills that's consequential. And so the big question that I get around that one is, if state agencies are not going to, they're not going to allow someone to correct their gender through a court order, and they're going to require that it's the gender that you are assigned at birth, then how is that going to affect the courts in Texas that still do name and gender marker corrections, right? So Travis, we have 354 counties in Texas. I don't know if anybody took their Texas history, but we have 354 counties. Travis County is a county where you can go to court and with the right evidence, and if y'all need any help, please reach out to me, because it's something I've been doing well before I ever came to Lambda. And there's some wrinkles right now, but you can change your name and your gender marker, or just your gender marker, through a court. And so the question is, if state agencies are not going to abide by a court order, changing someone's name and correcting their gender, then are courts going to continue to do that? And the only courts in our state right now that are really doing this is in Travis County, and the judges are committed to keep doing this. Travis County Law Library has forms on their website, and y'all have probably heard about now, for the purposes of getting the gender marker on your driver's license corrected, that, and also your birth certificates, that those agencies were not complying with those court orders. So we're gonna see that continue to happen, but those courts in Travis County will still, it's separation of powers, right? There's the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and I'm talking a whole lot, but I know that I get this, I've got like 3 phone calls after this thing today, having this very discussion. So, so you can still get a name change and a gender marker correction if you go to court in Austin. Go to the Travis County Law Library's website. They've got petitions, whether you just want a gender marker correction or a name change, but the reason you want the name change is based on your gender identity. And it's got all the instructions, but you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to Lambda Legal has a help desk. And we get calls from all over the country, both old-fashioned phone calls and intakes on the internet. And so you can still do that. And then for many folks, they're fleeing our state, right? I just was in Denver for 3 days, and I met with a bunch of families who have fled from Texas to Colorado, because Colorado has a comprehensive non-discrimination ordinance, which says you can't be discriminated against for the purposes of housing, for the purposes of employment, for the purposes of anything, and that includes disability, familial status, the whole 9 yards. And so, where am I going with all that? I'm still talking. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night because I got home late, but bottom line is, if you get a gender marker correction here in Texas, you can take it to any other state that will follow a court order, and they're entitled to full faith and credit. Now, there's a few states that won't right now. Tennessee won't, and Kansas won't. But you can go to any one of those other good states, like the safe states, right? Where are the safe states, real quick? New Mexico, California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Maryland, Washington State, Oregon State, Minnesota. Those are all, and if anybody wants me to go over that later. So that's, there are more bills, there's 6 that passed, but really what they're doing is they're targeting transgender people, and the other piece of it is, the other big one I would say is the one that says that for any insurance carrier who has covered, I call it healthcare for transgender people. I don't call it gender affirming care because it's not what it is. It's just healthcare, right? And so, so for those insurance companies that have previously covered that type of care, they're going to have to cover detransitioning, right? Which we know is like 0.007% of folks. And they're gonna have to cover what any complications from that type of healthcare in perpetuity, which means that the insurance companies are not gonna cover that type of healthcare anymore. There's a thing called, right, statutes of limitations, that you can only sue a doctor for every other type of thing that they do wrong to you for 2 years. But they're in essence making it so that no doctor is gonna wanna provide that type of care because they're always gonna be subject to a potential malpractice lawsuit. So there's that one, and then there's one more, and I promise I'm probably talking too long. SB 12, SB 12 is a bill, so stay tuned, all right? Stay tuned, go look at Lambda Legal and the ACLU's website and keep monitoring that. But SB 12 is in essence a bill that further builds on all of the I'm gonna call it DEIB and anti-critical race theory efforts that we've seen across the state over the course of the last 3 or 4 legislative sessions. But what it does is it makes it even worse. And not only can we not teach the truth, we can't teach history. And our public universities and colleges are not getting funded to teach anything that looks like DEIB. But now you're not gonna be able to have student groups meet on campus, which is under federal law. There's a thing called the Equal Access Act, which says that if you're gonna have a Christian group on campus and they're gonna meet on campus, then you've gotta make that campus be able to have any other group. You can't exclude one group as opposed to another. And so the big part of SB 12 now is they're outlawing gay straight alliances or those types of groups on campus. They're outlawing LGBTQ identities and curriculums, and they're also requiring the schools to out their kids if the kid goes to a teacher or counselor where it may be a safe space, right? And so that's gonna go into effect on September 1, but stay tuned over the course of the next month. I'm just saying, just kind of pay attention. And one quick big thing, I'm seeing a bunch of people from PFLAG here, right? Please, y'all, anyone who has an LGBTQ kid, but especially a trans kid, please join PFLAG. And we're telling people, no offense to any of the local PFLAG groups, we're telling people to join PFLAG National. It's $50 a year. It covers the whole family. And why do you want to do that? You want to do that because of all the cases that Lambda has filed suit on. PFLAG is our partner. PFLAG has been the folks that have been our main plaintiffs. So if you're a member of PFLAG, that means you get the benefit of the cases that we filed, not just the cases here in Texas, but we filed, I'll talk about this when we get to the kind of larger, broader landscape. But please go join PFLAG, join National, and the only reason we say that is because they keep really good records. Some of the local chapters, not Lisa, not Fort Worth, not Houston, but some of the local chapters that are smaller don't always keep those good records. And if they don't have a record of you joining, then you may not be included in the injunctions that we've got to stop some of the bad laws. That was a lot. There's more, there were 6 of them, but those are the main ones, yep.
Yeah, I'll share that those are 2 of the 3 of the ones that are top of mind for folks that I've been talking to as well. I'll say right now, as you may know, we are in a special session. We're actually officially in the 2nd special session. It's like, whiplash. So as you know, Texas legislature meets every other year due to old arcane law. And when they gavelled out, they knew that there were some things left unfinished, some unfinished business. And Greg Abbott can call as many special sessions as he would like. They're 30 days long each. The first special session was supposed to be dedicated to addressing flood relief, addressing a hemp ban that Greg Abbott vetoed and lawmakers wanted to rectify and pass a version that they were happy with. And as you all likely know, redistricting became the major focus there. And I'll also say a quick disclaimer, Keshet is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit, just putting that out there. But we do know that President Trump really is encouraging Greg Abbott and states like Texas to redistrict in this way, so the GOP took this up. One of the issues that came up in that first special session was an anti-trans bathroom ban. And that's something that was attempted to be passed in the regular session and did not make it through the House side of the legislature. So during the special session, Greg Abbott, among his dozen or so priorities for the session, included this bathroom ban, which, as we know, when there are things to address like flood relief, why would we get invested in a culture war issue like that? So, all things being considered, they did not, obviously, they were not able to pass anything in this first session because of the lack of quorum from the Democrats leading the state. They do expect that they do expect that some of the Democrats will return for the second special session in the redistricting fight, then sort of taking it to the courts and playing that battle out there. But there is a concern about this bathroom ban because it has resurfaced in this second session that gavelled in on Friday. The legislature has essentially suspended many of the rules that require a certain amount of time to ask for testimony and schedule hearings. So a lot of the rules and norms, this might sound familiar, the rules and norms are suspended at this moment. And there's a concern that this anti-trans bathroom bill could pass, and it essentially bans folks from using the correct restroom in state facilities, and that includes, facilities where folks are fleeing, domestic violence, and state schools, and prisons as well. This is really not just a matter of bathroom access. This is just like basic safety for folks. So in this moment, quick call to action, we can be contacting our lawmakers and urging them to not allow this to pass. I know that Equality Texas and TENT, the Texas Education Network of Texas, have issued a joint statement along with the Human Rights Campaign, really urging our lawmakers and the Democrats as well to hold the line on this issue and really stand up for our trans community, because we can't allow this particular community of ours to be scapegoated in this way and really treated as political pawns. So just wanted to mention that that's like the latest sort of breaking news on the special session. We can probably talk more about that, but wanted to uplift that as well as something that's been happening.
And just a point of clarification, question on the bathroom ban bill. So that passed the Texas Senate last special session. But my understanding is if it goes into the next one, they have to go through both houses again. It has to go back through the Senate. But they don't have to do committee hearings again, is that right? In the Senate?
Yeah, my understanding is that they've suspended that rule.
Yeah.
So yes, they do have to, it's as if the clock has started all over again on these bills. On Friday, they rushed it's now numbered SB 8. It was SB 7 in the first special session, SB 8, the bathroom bill, that did fly through the Senate committee with really no ability to testify. There were committee members who were able to testify, but That whole process happened again, and now it will be up for a Senate vote, expected to pass through there again, and then there will be a House battle.
And the reason I asked that was because just the best, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, usually the best time and place to testify is often the committee hearings for bills. And because it's not going to go back into committee for the Senate, you're only going to have an opportunity to testify before the House committee again, correct? So just as an advocacy measure, I think that's just kind of important to keep in mind. And you can correct me again if I'm wrong, but my view is that they suspended that rule so that they didn't have to generate more public comment opportunities in the Senate committee for the next special session. That's probably the case.
Yeah, it's largely an effort to shut the public out from what should be our right to the democratic process.
Let me just quickly add to that too. This version of this bathroom bill also allows for what's called a private cause of action. So that means that if someone goes into a bathroom and they think that somebody who's trans is in their bathroom and not in the sex they were assigned at birth, then they can report that, right? So that's also not good. And I can tell you all, since 1989, there was a Supreme Court case called Price Waterhouse versus Hopkins. You have been going to the bathroom in the workplace with people who are trans, and the whole world, over and over again for all these years, the whole world has not fallen apart, right? So there's that. And something else about the testimony, it's really, really important for the lawyers, because what we do is when people go and they testify in front of these House committees, and really you don't, as far as bang for your buck, you want to go testify in front of a House committee anyway, because the Senate is so deeply red that if you go testify in front of the Senate committee, it's not really going to make a difference. You're not going to sway enough hearts and minds to make sure that that bill doesn't get through the Senate, because then what's required after it gets out of the committee is it goes to the full Senate, there's a vote, and then it goes over to the House. And so you want to testify in front of the House committee about a particular bill, but why is it important is because lawyers can use that record. If what we hear is hate and bias and animus towards one group, like trans folks, then we can use that as a way that we challenge the law once it passes. Or when people go and tell their real life stories, right? What's the impact of that law on your lived experience? If the impact of that law on your lived experience is that it's going to stop you from fully participating in society, which is what these laws are clearly designed to do, right? Then that helps us show why the law is no good, because it disparately or disproportionately impacts one subset of our population based on just who they are. Does that make sense?
Thanks. So I want to go to Obergefell because there's always a lot of interest in that. We'll probably come, because I have a lot of questions also back to Texas legislature, so we may go to Obergefell and then come back. But on Obergefell, so there's several questions that are concerned, obviously about Obergefell being overturned, especially given the recent lawsuit. I believe it's Kim Davis again. She was the clerk in Kentucky who refused originally to sign the wedding certificate of the couple. Please correct me if I'm wrong here. And they sued, and so now she's suing for monetary damages too, because she was not protected. So anyway, like that case, anything you can say about that case in particular, or if you see there is a more dangerous case out there, or what, just assessing the overall risk. I guess we'll start with Shelly here for like the legal response, and then Rachel, any advocacy or anything you want to add.
Yeah, okay, so, y'all, Lambda Legal, also 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan group. We've been around since 1973, so, and our mission is to achieve the full recognition of LGBTQ plus people and everyone living with HIV. So when you think of marriage equality, who was the architect of marriage equality? It was Lambda Legal. When you think of transgender folks being able to serve in the military, that was Lambda Legal. When you think of students' rights and these GSAs being able to participate on campuses, that was Lambda Legal. When you think of being able to work in the workplace and not be discriminated against, the Bostock decision, that all of those cases are Lambda Legal cases. People don't know that we're really out there because we've always had, the lawyers have been doing all the business and we haven't been doing all the sort of advertising and whatnot. But how we do our work is through impact litigation, public policy work, which is going in front of legislatures, and then education, which is like what we're doing today. And if I didn't say it before, I'm gonna say it again, we have a help desk, and we have on our website tons of resources based on whatever your interest is. So if you want to talk about identity documents and passports, we've got a great YouTube video, and then we have a whole litany of FAQs. If you're a parent of a trans kid and you want to know what your rights are, we've got that. We've got the, if you're an LGBTQ older adult, we've got information about how you can get Social Security benefits, even if you were unable to marry, and that still holds true right now. So if anybody has any questions about that, their partner died, you were together for a long time, you're now able to get Social Security benefits, and you're wondering whether or not you can get it on the person that you never were able to marry because of the marriage laws that we saw across the country. That's all, so we have all these resources, so please reach out to us or reach out to me. I'm going out of town next week, I gotta go to Washington, D.C. So please say a prayer for me so I can come back. But so, okay, so that was a lot of background. So marriage equality, what's the scoop? Kim Davis, good grief. Okay, so Kim Davis this is her third time going to the Supreme Court. And so the very first time, well, let me go back to 2020, she went to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court said, we're not gonna hear your case. There weren't enough, you have to get 4 of the 9 justices to say yes to hear a case, and only 2 of them said, we wanna hear it. And guess who the 2 were? Right? Thomas and Alito, and it's very, very short. That case is called Davis versus Ermold, which is the same name as this one that we have again. But in that case, the United States, those 2 folks, Thomas and Alito, said marriage equality was wrong when it was decided, and the only people that can fix it is the United States Supreme Court, and it is a violation of our religious beliefs and religious practices, and it needs to be revisited. So that was 2020. Since then, there have been other cases, like, for example, Dobbs, where Thomas, in his concurrence, said, we need to revisit a whole body of law that's called substantive due process. Forget the name, substantive due process. Just know that all those things that allow you to raise your kids the way you want to raise your kids, educate them the way you want to educate them, and that can be a double-edged sword if you have a non-affirming parent for a trans kid. But contraception, abortion, so many, being able to marry somebody who's not of the same race that you are, all of those laws, that body of law, Thomas has said in the Dobbs opinion, we need to revisit that, including Obergefell and including Lawrence versus Texas. So Lawrence versus Texas, Lambda Legal case, which said sodomy laws across the country that made our relationships criminalized. That's Lambda Legal 2003, right here in our state. And so, once you got rid of that, right, then the folks, for example, who were teachers who were being fired if they were gay, or the lawyers who were being fired, or if you were working for a judge, like I was, couldn't, we were never out. People were not out. And so that was one thing that made us destigmatized, which led to marriage equality, right? So that whole body of law that led to so many of the rights that we have right now, Thomas has already said, we want to look at it. And then there have been other cases. So the court's primed to overrule marriage equality. So what happens if they overrule marriage equality? And then I'm going to come back to this particular case. What happens if they overrule marriage equality? Texas was one of 13 states that did not allow marriage equality at the time the decision came down. So, and Texas has a whole slew of laws on the books in the family code and in our Texas Constitution that say that same-sex marriage and anything that looks like same-sex marriage is not a thing, it's void, and it's against public policy. So, if marriage equality goes away, that means that it's going to go back to the individual states, and the states are going to be able to decide whether or not they want to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. So Texas is going to be one of those states, along with some of the other ones, and if anybody wants, you can guess who they are. Most of them are in the South, right? But if you were validly married in a jurisdiction that recognized your marriage at the time that you got married, you're still covered by the Respect for Marriage Act. So what's the Respect for Marriage Act? It was a law that was passed by Congress in 2022, and that law says that even if marriage equality goes away and it goes back to the states, and you live in a state that will not issue a same-sex marriage license to somebody that wants to get married, that state still has to recognize your marriage for all of the rights, responsibilities, and obligations that come with marriage. 1,138 rights come with marriage under federal law. And in Texas, think about it, homestead, rights having to do with if you're living with a disability, tax laws, decision-making about whether or not your spouse goes, if they go in the hospital. There are so many rights that come with marriage. So people, when Trump was first elected, people were like, oh my God, what about our marriages? So what I was telling people was, first thing, if you want to get married, go visit your CPA, right? And then if you're gonna go get married in a state like New Mexico, Colorado, I'm the same, California, Washington State. They passed marriage by popular vote. Maryland did too. Minnesota, Massachusetts, New York, Hawaii. Go to those states where marriage is really, really solid and get married. But if you're already married, you're good to go because you're covered by the Respect for Marriage Act. And the Respect for Marriage Act didn't just cover same-sex marriages, it covered folks who were in biracial marriages. So it took us from 1967 to 1922 or 23, I can't remember when it passed, but I got to go to the White House, so it was really pretty cool when Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act. But it took us all those years to say people who are not of the same ethnicity who are married, they're safe, because that used to be criminalized too, right? So you're safe if you were validly married at the time you were married. But what happens if the Respect for Marriage Act is challenged? So I think that we're going to see the Respect for Marriage in Obergefell Falls, which there are all the same right-wing folks that are proposing all this legislation, model legislation that we're seeing across the country. And right now, as we speak, 598 different bills are pending, and 66 of them have passed this year. And over the course of the last 5 years, we've had it's about 225 pieces of legislation have passed across the country that restrict LGBTQ civil rights and people who are living in black and brown or living with a disability. And when you restrict anybody's civil rights, you restrict everyone's civil rights. I think I already heard this once, but that's true, right? So, will the Respect for Marriage Act get challenged? Well, let me go back to, yes, all of these groups, ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, First Liberty Institute, Beckett Fund, they are jonesing and they're setting up cases across the country in those conservative states to overrule Obergefell. So we're gonna see a case other than Kim Davis's case, which I'll come talk about in a minute, and I know I'm talking fast and live. Yeah, we're gonna see a case. And so if the court decides not to hear Kim's case, this third iteration of it, then there's gonna be another one behind it. And we got some percolating right here in our state. So then what happens if the Respect for Marriage Act is challenged and that congressional law goes away? Then what's gonna happen to our marriages? We'll be back in a sort of a DOMA type of situation, but you still have those states like Hawaii, New York, Washington State, Colorado, kind of purple, New Mexico, that are still going to allow folks to get married, Massachusetts, and recognize those marriages, just like it was prior to the Windsor case, which was the case that said, we're gonna strike down DOMA. DOMA said that a marriage under federal law purposes was between a man and a woman. So there's still gonna be some good states, right? Okay. And that's not gonna happen for a while. And it may not happen at all, because maybe good things are gonna happen because of all cool things that we're all doing in the world. So, Kim Davis, why is she there again? Is the court gonna hear it? I don't know if they're gonna hear it or not. They shouldn't hear it because it's way out of time. I mean, when she refused to do the marriage licenses, it was in 2015. You don't get 3 bites at the apple with the United States Supreme Court. But right now, our United States Supreme Court is not following any of the procedural things that are there to make it so that everybody's treated fairly. So will the court hear this? Nathan's right. The issue here is really, there's 3 issues before the court that she's raised. They could choose to hear any one of them or all of them. One of them is, she's saying, look, what happened was, because of all of this, she refused to do the marriage license. She was sued, and the 2 men, Ermold, the 2 guys, who didn't get the marriage license, ended up getting $100,000 in attorney's fees back against her, a judgment against her personally. So she's saying, hey, I don't have to pay it because I was a government official. But if you're a government official, you have to follow the law. And so that's why she's right. You have to follow the law, and that's the Obergefell is the law of the land. So that's why she's having to pay them $100,000. She don't want to pay it, right? So she's saying, first off, I had a religious belief that I could refuse these marriage licenses, and I want you to look at that court again, and I don't want to have to pay this money. And oh, by the way, the third one is we shouldn't have marriage equality at all. Will the court take this case? I don't know. They shouldn't, because it's not. They didn't like it the second time they took it because of the procedural posture. But now we've got what we have on the United States Supreme Court. So what am I telling people to do? How do you fix all this, right? Go get married. Don't get married in 2 more wrinkles. And I can reach out to me again if this doesn't make sense. I know I'm still talking a lot. What can you do? Go get married in one of the good states if you're not already married. If you got married in a bad state like Texas, not all of the 13 states had laws on the books like Texas did, which said same-sex marriages are void, no good, against public policy. Because we have that law here, and a lot of my buddies, I got married here in Texas. And so if my marriage was no good when it originally started, because Texas has this law on the books, then maybe I'm not covered by the Respect for Marriage Act. So what did I just go do? I just went and got married again in Colorado. Just not like within the last month, right? So always a good reason to have a mocktail or a glass of wine. So for those people who got married here, most folks are going and getting married again in another good state. If you're already married, you can go to New York City. You don't have a waiting period. You can marry your person again. You can do that in Colorado. You can, so go to one of those states, go have a little vacation if you can afford it, but go get married again. If you were married here, if you're not married, go to one of the good states and get married, right? And so that's your way around this for right now. So, and then there's one other thing I was going to say, just lost my head. Go.
You're sick to, yeah.
Go, and then I'll come back.
I think like bottom line too in everything that you're saying, Shelly, is like there are steps between now and no more marriage equality. And I've been seeing a lot of headlines, and you might too, flying around saying marriage equality is ending. And the Supreme Court's gonna hear a case challenging marriage equality, and it's gonna be over. And they haven't taken up the case yet. Like, we just don't know if it's going to happen yet. So like, when you're seeing that news, just like an encouragement to like take a breath and check in with folks like Lambda Legal to see what the actual reality is, and follow that advice. And also, I just added to my list, get married again. So now I have another to-do to talk to my wife about.
we can have a big party. Here's what else you can do too, y'all, is whether or not you want to get married. Some folks don't want to get married. You need to go get your estate plans done, right? And that's not inexpensive. And so sometimes gay folks, who is it that you're going to name? So there are, let me just tell you this, there are law firms and lawyers right now that are committed to creating, and we're doing it, and we're going to be doing some pretty soon, so reach out to me, free legal clinics to do estate planning for LGBTQ people, whether or not you're married, because at least you can paper up your relationships, right? So you need a will, right? You need a document that says that this person is my partner, or here are the people that get to come in my hospital room, and you can't keep them out of my hospital room, right? You need a medical directive. So whenever you hear the word power of attorney, that means you're designating someone else to step into your shoes and to make the same decisions you would want to make. So medical power of attorney, I'm saying, hey Rachel, if I get sick or I'm in a coma, I trust you. You can come in and you can talk to the doctor and make medical decisions about what happens to me. A financial power of attorney, an agent to control disposition of remains. That is, who is it that gets to decide what happens to your body, right? And that used to be a thing too. Parents would come in, whisk off the body, and then the partner wouldn't get to go or have any say over it, right? Then there's another document, it's called the Declaration of Guardian. I won't go into the details of that, but come talk to me afterwards. I'm happy to talk to people, or call me on the phone. Just next week, I'm probably not going to call you back. But you can paper up your relationships. And so there's some law firms and a bunch of LGBTQ lawyers who are committed to creating these clinics now for people, because we can't do the name and gender correction clinics like we used to, or at least the big law firms won't, because Trump is coming after the big law firms and they've been sued, right? But we can do estate planning. So there's that. Oh.
Yeah, sorry. Just because we're kind of short on time for the rest of the panel, I've got a lot of questions. We're just not going to get to many more of them, but there was a couple that had a theme, so I'll just ask this and just see if you guys, if you can give a brief response. There's a lot of questions regarding the bathroom bill, the way the language is framed currently, and just kind of the theme of the question is, what is a public space? How is that defined? So if you're at a sports venue or something like that, would that be a public space, or is it only government buildings? Like how would the bathroom would that work, given the language of it?
I need to check into the language on this specific SB 8 currently, but I believe that it is federal government spaces, state spaces, so not general public spaces. So again, like we mentioned earlier, prisons, state schools, public schools that are funded by the state, yes. Shelters, domestic violence shelters. So yeah, still a huge impact. I mean, private businesses will still have the ability to, as I understand it, you know, sort of provide all gender restrooms, but facilities that are receiving state funding.
Yeah. Like for example, if it's a Texas Stadium, nope, we don't have that anymore. But if it's a concert hall that's run by the city, then that would fall, at least the way, I haven't read the language of this new one, I read the language of the last two that didn't go, but I'm sure it's probably almost identical. So it's political, any political subdivision that runs a public space, they would have the ability to say, and it's the section assigned to borough.
And as typical with many of these kinds of laws, there's no really specific enforcement mechanism that is recommended in these laws. So enforcement could just look like someone demanding to know someone's gender or sex. You know, there's a lot of questions of like, do we now have people monitoring restrooms? Like those are all, they have not actually defined what the enforcement looks like for things like this. It really is an effort to terrorize an entire community, for lack of a better term.
I believe this one, I thought it gave either the local DA or PAX, the AG. So this one differed from past versions, and it upped the fines.
Right,
correct?
there's definitely penalties. It's just sort of the question of how do you then, like in the moment, how do you
like
determine who
reporting
belongs in that bathroom, right? And that's the part that scares people out of existing, like it's an attack on trans people existing in public life. But the issue is that we're not going away, like we exist and we're here to stay, so.
So two quick good things. Montana, right? Montana passed a healthcare ban for trans kids, and I'm plugging Lambda, but we sued under the Montana state constitution because they have really robust rights, and it went up to the Montana Supreme Court, and the Montana Supreme Court said this law violates our state constitution. So you can get that type of healthcare in Montana, and there's not diddly squat the United States Supreme Court can say about it. And if you are a member of PFLAG, Lambda sued the executive order that says for trans kids under the age of 19 that they can't, let me go back, the federal funding that was going to healthcare providers that was providing that type of care is going to be taken away by FedGov. And so Lambda sued, we got an injunction. And so if you're a member of PFLAG, then you're covered by that injunction. So in those states where you still have medical providers that are doing that, so Colorado, New Mexico, just right over the border, Washington State, California, Massachusetts, Minnesota, they're still providing that care, but I can also tell you that some of those healthcare providers are starting to get freaked out, even though the federal funding is still coming to them. And so we're seeing less and less. We're down to about 30 clinics across the country right now.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. We're unfortunately out of time for this panel. I'm sorry we didn't get to a lot of the questions, but really good